Well, hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Reading Michael Jackson. I am your host, Lena, and you know that by now, right? I probably don't have to mention it every single time, but it's hard to stop. This is my routine, and I don't know how else to be. Either way, I am so happy to be back here with you today for a more normal episode. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed recording and editing the birthday episode, but I had a number of technical problems, so I must admit I am happy to be back in a routine again with traditional episode. And with that, this is interesting. I was looking ahead, and we only have 10 pieces left of Dancing the Dream, which to me is insane because, of course, I don't like to start projects without finishing them, but it's not like I never have before. I am very happy to say that I have seen this whole thing through, and now we only have 10 episodes left of season 1, and I just cannot believe it. So hopefully we will make them 10 really, really good ones. That's the hope, and that's the dream. Before I get into this week's episode, I just wanted to comment on something related to the birthday episode that came out on Friday, August 29th. So here's the thing. I had to listen to that about 500 times to get the editing correct. And it wasn't until I had pretty much finished the episode that I was driving for a couple of hours the next day, and I was listening to Michael, of course, the entire time. And I was struck by how many songs I didn't mention. Oh my gosh. And it was painful. And this is why, once again, I do not pick favorites when it comes to favorite songs of Michael's or albums or even videos or anything. It's like, it's impossible. But as I was driving, I was listening to so much of the Jacksons and the Jackson 5 and all different stages of Michael's career and even some live stuff. And oh my God, I was screaming as if I were at the concert myself. Are you like this? Do you listen to Michael in the car? And if you do you scream your head off the whole time? Like, I really do. And I sound like a psycho because I'm not just singing like a normal fan. I'm like screaming my thoughts and feelings and bearing my soul. It's a mess, but oh my gosh, it's a great time. So I wish I could make every episode like just me freaking out about songs, but no one would listen to that. So anyway, I just wanted to recognize if you listened to that episode and you were like, hey, where's the Jacksons music? It was an oversight and it was an accident because that's some of my favorite Michael Jackson music, honestly. And I wish that I had an endless stream of time to talk about it and gush eternally, but here we are. So I don't know why I felt the need to share that at the top of this episode. Maybe I'm still coming off the high of listening to Michael for hours today, and it was just like the best. So let's get into it though, shall we? Or else it will be a very long episode. And this is actually quite a short piece. Now, I think I mentioned this maybe in last week's episode. We're heading into a few weeks of more poetic writing, and that'll be fun because we've been mostly on prose for a while. But this week's piece is actually a bit on the short side. So we'll see what I have to say about it. But for now, I invite you to relax and get comfortable and get cozy and join me for this reading of Child of Innocence. Child of Innocence. Child of innocence, I miss your sunny days. We joyously frolicked in extended plays. Ever since you've left the scene, the streets are lonely, dark, and mean. Child of innocence, return to me now. With your simple smile, show them how this world once again can respond to your glance, and heartbeats flutter to the rhythm of your dance. Child of innocence, your elegance, your beauty beckons me now beyond the call of duty. Come fly with me far and above, over the mountains in the land of love. Child of innocence, messenger of joy, you've touched my heart without a ploy. My soul is ablaze with a flagrant fire. To change this world is my deepest desire. Okay, so as I said, this is a really short piece from Michael. It's not the shortest we will get. In fact, in a couple of weeks, there will be one that is extremely short. But this is one of the shortest ones we've had, especially in a while, as we've had these slightly longer prose pieces the last few weeks. But this piece is interesting to me. Now, I read it once before recording, and then I read it while recording. And the first time I read it, I had a couple of ideas about it, but I often find that when I slow down to record, because I read it really slowly when I record, and when I slow down to do that, I often find I'm able to feel and see new things from it. And I'll be honest, this piece actually made me very sad when I slowed down to really digest it. So why did it make me sad? Maybe it's obvious. Maybe it made you sad. But I wanted to talk about that a little bit in the context of Michael and his life and some of the things we know about him at this point. Not just things we know from the book, but things that, as I mentioned, I think a week or so ago, the unique thing about being a Michael fan, and especially about looking back on his life as a whole, like so for me, not becoming a fan until well after his death, when I examine Michael's life, I can do so with the full picture of how his life started and ended in mind. And I imagine that is a unique position to be in compared to kind of growing up along with Michael, because I have kind of a hindsight, I have a kind of cultural knowledge of the time and the things that he experienced, and I know how things turned out. So when I read a piece like this, for example, or I read any other piece from him where it's clear that I can see in retrospect more what was going on with him, it's kind of painful in its own way. So perhaps let me explain what I mean by that. When I think about Michael and his relationship to childhood and youth and innocence, this is one of, how many, a dozen or so pieces from this book, which only has 46 pieces. This is one of many that reference innocence and childhood. One of many. And obviously, Michael's career and personal life has been in a lot of ways defined by and unfortunately marred by his relationship to these topics. So, they always offer an opportunity for a real critical evaluation of Michael's relationship to these ideas. And I don't want to just belabor this point or repeat myself from other episodes. I want to offer something different. And I guess as I was reading this, the first thought that came to mind was how there are times when Michael's wisdom and his sensitivity and his unique perspectives on life and his seemingly highly evolved spiritual evolution, all of these things can make it easy to forget that on a very base level, Michael was a human being and a very traumatized human being who had significant pain in his own life, relating not only to his childhood, but to catapulting out of his childhood without ever properly experiencing it. So when I read Child of Innocence, this piece, I am reading this through the lens of Michael mourning himself, Michael mourning his own innocence, Michael wanting to find it and reconnect with it. Now, these are not new themes. These are not new ideas from this book. But this piece made me more sad than any of those other pieces. And I guess we'll talk about why that might be as we work through this piece together. But for now, let's just start again. Child of innocence, I miss your sunny days. We joyously frolicked in extended plays. Ever since you left the scene, the streets are lonely, dark, and mean. So this is the first verse, and instantly I think, okay, this is about himself. This is him missing that inner side of himself. It's about the departure that he felt of his innocence and when he felt himself growing up and all the things that came with it. It almost reminds me of a person talking about missing their childhood best friend, where they can remember what childhood was like. They can remember what it was like to play with that person and experience life through and with that person, but they can't access them anymore. They don't have a connection to them now. And that's what this read like to me. Like Michael recognizing that he had grown up and that he couldn't feel that anymore. And the thing is that I think is really important to distinguish here is that I don't believe this is just about a trauma of growing up. A lot of people don't want to grow up because they miss a lack of adult responsibility or whatever. But I think it's a lot deeper than that for Michael, because Michael grew up in the public eye. He didn't ever grow up without the world's judgment. And the world is judgmental of children. And the world does treat children badly. But if there was ever a time when Michael could be truly just like free as a person, it would have been when he was a child, before the true expectation of him looking a certain way or being charismatic or being, appealing to the opposite sex or whatever. I mean, before those pressures existed to constantly perform your own desirability to the world, before that time, when he could just be a little boy who loved to sing and dance. Yes, he had to deal with the pressures of his father and the pressure to show up and be good. And I would never in a million years try to undercut the damage that those experiences may have had on him. I guess what I want to distinguish here is that when Michael has talked about his childhood, he would say things like he didn't know that he was good. He just knew he would get up and sing and dance and people would respond to him. So it was like an automated thing, just like being a child is an automated thing. You don't know how to be as a child. You're not thinking about every step you take. You're just existing. And as you get older, the world is kind of crushing you into submission and making you think about everything you do and question yourself and develop insecurities and all of this. So I think that's a lot of what he's talking about here. But there's more I want to say about that. I just wanted to establish here in this first stanza that it's almost as if when he was a child, he had that innocence that was going along in the world with him. And as he got older, he kept walking and that stayed behind, and it grew distant from him and he couldn't see it anymore, because as he learned about life and the world, it couldn't remain with him. And so he had to keep walking, and it went from being playful and frolicking and fun to being kind of dark and scary. And he even says mean. The world grew mean. As many of us know, Michael talked about this, the public's reaction to him as he got older and treating him poorly, and unkind comments he received from strangers about his appearance and his acne and all the various things. For a child who had only ever been praised for how adorable they were, I can see why that would be traumatizing to go through that in such a public manner. and to have no escape, and have that part of yourself that felt so safe in that world no longer be something you can access. It just breaks my heart, I'll be honest. But let's continue. He goes on, child of innocence, return to me now. With your simple smile, show them how. The world once again can respond to your glance, and heartbeats flutter to the rhythm of your dance. This is exactly what I was just talking about, this part. I mean, the ease of being a child performer, the ease of being accepted by everyone, the ease of just being adorable and adored through that, and feeling like just being himself was enough. And what really saddens me is I feel like in this stanza, you can see that Michael really equated being this carefree and adored person with being a child and being innocent inside. So it makes you kind of think about why that became so important to him to retain. If some part of him believed if he could just access that part within himself, then he would feel freely and totally loved again, then of course he would spend his life kind of fighting for that. It's not just not wanting to grow up. It's wanting to hold on to the feeling of being loved without a condition. Now again, I'm talking about from the public perspective. Michael's childhood was very complicated on a personal level, so I'm not trying to suggest that in any way his childhood was easy, because it wasn't. But it seems to me that despite very difficult circumstances for a little boy, the freeness inside of him was present until a certain point. Like I said, he's talked about how difficult adolescence was for him. So it would make sense that his associations with childhood, while difficult for him, also represent a kind of freedom and maybe happiness even that he couldn't access as he got older. Child of innocence, your elegance, your beauty beckons me now beyond the call of duty. Come fly with me far and above, over the mountains in the land of love. And in this stanza, I think the most important line is this part. Your elegance, your beauty beckons me now beyond the call of duty. So if the call of duty is to be a performer, to show up on stage, to perform, to be enough, then I see what he's saying here as this deep yearning to return to that child of innocence within himself. It stems from more than just his desire to be loved and adored as a performer. He needs it for something much deeper, beyond the call of duty of being a performer. He needs it and wants it just for himself. Over the mountains in the land of love. I couldn't help but think about that literally. It could just be a nice phrase, but over the mountains made me think of leaving Los Angeles and going through the mountain range and going into the valley where Neverland was, the Santa Ynez Valley. It made me think about that, honestly. And if that is part of what he's referencing here, beyond just my life in the public, come with me so I can be happy. Let me access that happiness for myself again. And like I said, I could be reading into that part, but I don't know. I think that makes sense. If the land of love is Neverland for him, this place he created where he can safely return to that part of himself, then of course he would be inviting that part of himself in, right? And then he ends, child of innocence, messenger of joy, you've touched my heart without a ploy. My soul is ablaze with a flagrant fire. To change this world is my deepest desire. And I see this final ending as really the most hopeful part. I see it as him sharing and perhaps revealing that this revelation about childhood and inner innocence, and harnessing that as being a beacon of his own happiness and ability to access freedom and happiness, was a breakthrough for him. it was a breakthrough. I almost feel like he had a turning point at this time in his life where he began to really understand that he could heal himself from all these difficult things. And that part of healing himself would be embracing that part and letting himself access it once again or find it once again. So when he says, "My soul is ablaze with flagrant fire," I see that as him in this revelation, in this state of kind of joy and empowerment, really embracing the fact that all he wants in life is to change this world, and maybe changing it, for kids that suffered in ways that he could relate to, or maybe changing it in all large respects, or maybe in thinking that true honesty with himself meant that beyond accolades, beyond, musical triumphs and the things that he could achieve, the depth of why he wanted to do that boiled down to wanting to change the world. So I often think about this, for example, Michael's desire to make Thriller the biggest selling album of all time, and how he would repeat this as a mantra, and he wanted to achieve it. I believe with everything I know about Michael that wasn't an ego thing as much as I want to move the needle for Black artists, and I want to permanently cement myself in musical history. But I've often wondered for Michael, as he got older and he went through the 80s, especially when he was just award after award after award and lifetime achievements and all kinds of things and Grammys and everything, the biggest success a person can have. And getting through that, and it's still not feeling like he'd achieved anything, or it's still not quite feeling like enough, I would imagine that would require a lot of soul searching. And in this book, I just get the sense, and perhaps it's because of the time frame, I get the sense that he'd gone through some kind of serious personal growth in the late 80s and into the early 90s, where he kind of turned a new leaf and found a different level of maturity, emotional stability, maybe spiritual revelation, really coming to terms with who he was and what he wanted and accepting himself in a different way. I just get that vibe from him, that as he was moving into what I guess really the dangerous era, and in that time period, he was really taking hold of himself and really becoming proud of who he was intrinsically, not just as a performer, not just as someone to be loved by others, but as a person with value, just for being a person, And I think that maybe part of how he accessed that was realizing that the child innocence that he's referring to here is something he could access with the right amount of healing. Now, something I want to say is that obviously we talk a lot about innocence with Michael, and I've said in other episodes how I just don't like thinking of Michael as childlike in the way that it's often portrayed by other people, as if he was somehow emotionally stunted. I don't think that's fair, personally, and I'm not going to go on again about why. I've said it a million times, but I do think that it's important to remember that Michael himself had said that he felt like he had been old his entire life, like he had been an old soul, that he was never really a child. And there's a lot of reasons why, it could be personal maturity and psychological maturity, emotional maturity, but it could also be, and probably largely was, due to personal experiences. Michael had mature, inappropriate experiences as a child, spending times in the adult world, in sexual scenarios, like in strip clubs and nightclubs, being around adult performers and witnessing God knows what as a little child, witnessing sexual activity while he was on tour as a child. These are things that he was not this innocent person, unexposed to anything. He had seen so much, and there was not time for him to really be a child. And I can only imagine how hard it was for him to retain innocence when the world was aggressively and violently ripping it from him. And then, I think about Michael. I was driving today, and like I said, I was listening to him, and I listened to the song Dear Michael from Forever Michael, the Motown album. And it's such a cute song. But I was thinking about how weird it is in a way that teen idols exist and like teen heartthrobs exist, and how Michael was one at 13, 14. He was marketed to be dreamy to girls and for girls to love him and, fantasize about being his girlfriend and all this stuff. And he himself was going through the same experience of puberty and growing up as the girls listening to him who had crushes on him, and how there was no space allotted for him to figure that part out of himself. There was no space given for him. It was just the expectation of him performing desirability, as I said earlier, him performing fantasy for other people. And where was there room for him? And so I can see that as he got older and as these projections were put on him and all this pressure was put on him, and the comments about his looks came, and the expectations of to be beautiful and to remain as talented as he always was, and to constantly be available in the minds of the people who wanted him, and to always know you're being compared to every other artist and that people expect you to fail as a child star. And, just to have all of that pressure on you when you're a child yourself is just an unbelievable thing to endure. And then he did. And so you hear about this and you hear about his life, and like I said, this piece made me sad for that reason. Now I think, again, this piece represents a kind of growth, a full circle recommitment to himself, perhaps a full circle understanding of what it meant to be an innocent child and what it meant to hold on to that. But it doesn't change the fact that, in my estimation, writing this came from a place of real pain and really painful experiences. And when I think about the loneliness he experienced at that time in his life, it's really heartbreaking. And I'm not trying to be depressing, and I'm very sorry if I am. I promise you, I have been in a great mood all day and a wonderful mood about Michael himself. So this is not, I'm not trying to drag you into some dark place. I promise. But I don't know. This piece just really got to me, I guess, today. So I think it reminded me a little bit, on a personal note. Very recently, I was reading some of my old journals from childhood and then transitioned to teen journals. And the transition of my child mind to my teen mind really broke my heart, to see this very innocent view of the world go into a very dark one. And I think to some degree that's a normal part of growing up. But it's also really sad if there's some childhood trauma attached to that, and being able to look and see like, oh yeah, it's actually really devastating to see someone grow up and lose that sparkle of joy and freedom, I don't think it has to be, and I think that sounds like that's where Michael arrived at the end. He could retain it, he could access it again, and that ultimately he would use it to make the world a better place. And he did. So we will close there. I hope I didn't depress you too much. I don't ever mean to be depressing, but my God, this man breaks my heart and I can't help it. Sometimes I just cry about him unexpectedly. And I guess this is one of those days. I'm going to go cry now. But needless to say, I still appreciated this episode and having a chance to really think through this piece. And again, it's longer than I expected for such a short piece, but I hope that it was at least an enjoyable conversation for you as well. So thank you once again for listening. Have a wonderful week and weekend, and we will talk soon. Take care.